RhymBil is now online. Hey guys and girls, this is the last video in our series on making a to-do list, and today we're going to be finishing up our JavaScript with our Firebase stuff. Let's go! So just like we did last time, we just want to go ahead and set up our Firebase. Alright, so here in our script, we want to set up our inputs. The first input we're going to have is our input box, and then we're going to set up our input date. Follow me. Alright, so it'd be kind of nice if we had a validation system, so I decided to make one. In this validation, we're checking if our input box is not empty, and if our input date is not empty. And if they're not empty, that means there's something in it. And if there's something in it, then we want to continue because we don't want to be sending blank data. Alright, so let's move on to the Firebase stuff. The way we're going to be saving our data is going to be different from what you might typically do. Because we're going to be able to edit our task, we need to do this. So we're going to set up a key, and our key is going to be equal to firebase.database.ref, and then it's going to have a child in our ref. So if we go back to our Firebase database, you can see our child is going to be underneath our app where this says null. And as for our child name, we could just call it unfinished task. And then we want to push our key into that child, and that key is going to have our task data. And to show you guys what this key would look like in our database, let's go ahead and log it. Go back to our website, refresh, and now let's put in some fake data. We have an error, of course, and of course it's because I spelled ref wrong and I spelled it red. Let's go back and change it. Voila. You should now see we have a key, and this is going to be our key that has all our task data. Alright, so let's go back to our script. Now we can go on to making our task. So we're going to create a task object, and in our task object, we're going to have a task value. And our task value is going to be equal to our input box dot value. And don't forget, you put commas instead of semicolons when separating data in here. And now the next thing is to do is to set up our input date. Our input date is going to be equal to our input date dot value. And then we're going to have our key, and our key is going to be equal to our key value. Done. Alright, so do you guys remember when I said we're going to write our data in a weird way? Well, this is because instead of posting our data normally, we're actually updating our data. Well, this is because when we edit our task, we're going to need to update it. So instead of writing and updating, I'm just going to update the whole time, which just makes it easier for you guys to follow along. So follow what I do. Alright, so now that we got all our script all set out, let's go ahead and save, go back to our web page, refresh, and now if we put in some fake data, doesn't matter where you put in, but you can see when we hit enter and go back to our Firebase, wait, it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. I'm done. Alright, you guys should just leave now. I'm just done. So apparently it turns out when you create an object, you actually need an equal sign. Well, just go ahead and put in equal signs both in your update and task objects. Alright, so if we go ahead and save what we have, go back to Firebase, you should now see we have our unfinished tasks child, and underneath that we have our key, and underneath our key we have our data. And a key thing to note with our data set is that it's always arranged alphabetical. This is key to note later on. Alright, so now that we can save our data in Firebase, how can we display that data in our website? Well, we're going to create a function, call it create unfinished task. This is going to be our manager for basically creating our HTML elements. Alright, so now we're going to start things off by declaring what our unfinished task container is. So our unfinished task container is going to be equal to document.getElements by class name. Notice how it's class name, not ID. And notice how it's elements, not element. This is because in our previous tutorial, we got a bit lazy, and instead of slapping an ID onto these divs, we just called it container, and that's our class. So unlike most people, we're going to do this the hard way. You can also add an ID onto this container and call it unfinished task container, or you can do it this way. This way allows you to be cool. So we're going to add square brackets and we're going to put 0. This signifies that it's the first element with the class name of container, which is our unfinished task container. Awesome. Or if you just want to take the easy way out, just slap an ID onto this and just say get elements by ID. Alright, so the first thing we want to do to this container is to empty it. To empty it, we just say unfinished task container.inner HTML is equal to nothing. And that's how we empty out a container. We do this so when we have more data, it doesn't stack on each other. It simply clears it, then puts on the new ones. Okay, so now we're done with that, we want to create an array. We're going to call this array task array. Our task array is going to be a reflection of our database, but for every task. And then below this, we're going to retrieve our data. So here we have this line, which is getting our data from our unfinished task child. And then we're saying once we get the value, then we get it. The difference between once and on is that once is only called once, as in one time, but on is called every time the value changes. And now what we're going to do is to take a snapshot, and for every snapshot we just want to get the child data, and then we just want to get the key and the data value of the child. This part isn't really important, but the most important part is that below all this, you want to push this data into our task array. But remember, our child data is actually an object, but we want to convert it to an array because it's easier. So we actually have to go task array.push object of values child data. And that's how we can convert an object to an array. Now it's way easier to handle. Okay, so now we have this data pushed into our array. Now we just want to create a for loop going through each data in our array. So once we got this for loop completed, let's go ahead and console.log the task array. Now you can see when we save, refresh our website, and go to console.log, you can see that we get 3 arrays. And these 3 arrays are signifying the 3 data sets that we have in our unfinished task, and you can see them here. Now if we were to open these, they're exactly what we have in our database, but they just look way simpler and easier to handle. Well, now we can use these data sets to create our tasks in HTML. So now we're going to create 3 variables, and these variables are going to be our task date, our task key, and our task title. And these are going to be in reference to our Firebase date, key, and title. By the way, let's go ahead and change it from task to title, because title sounds way better than task. Just follow what I do. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's go ahead and convert all our HTML elements to JavaScript form. What I mean by all is just our task container and everything in it. So let's go ahead and do it. I know there's a bit of a tedious process, you might miss a few things or not, but try and keep up, try and follow along with what I do. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add something new. We're going to add a data attribute to our task container, and this data is going to be our key, signified by the dash key. And in our data key, we're going to pass in our task key. And our task key is basically how we're going to keep track of each task that's being removed and being added in. It's just for some purposes, as also just to show you how we can incorporate HTML elements with Firebase elements. So you guys remember our unfinished task container? We're actually going to append our task container inside our unfinished task container, just like we did in our HTML format. Alright, so now you can see it working perfectly fine. Now we have two blank task containers, and we have two because in our data set, in our Firebase database, we actually have two tasks to do that I haven't done. So I'm gonna get beat now. And now I'm just gonna finish up the rest of our HTML stuff. There's one thing I do want to mention. When you do append these in JavaScript, remember the order of how you append it does affect the HTML structure. So if you were to append something above something else, then it would automatically change the order, or this could simply just give you an error. Alright, so it seems like we got everything transferred over to our JavaScript portion. So let's go back to our HTML file and delete the task containers we have here, because we don't need them anymore. Alright, so let's go ahead and save all our files, go back to our website, refresh, and you should now see it working, but not really, because it's not displaying anything. So let's go ahead and check our console, and we can see task data is not defined. So going back to our JavaScript here, I accidentally spelled task data wrong, so let's go ahead and fix it. Okay, so perfectly, now we got it working, but our CSS properties aren't here. So let's go back to our JavaScript file, and we can see we're not appending the element, but rather the value. So let's fix that. Awesome, well now you can see our task is being displayed properly. So now let's make it so we can view our task whenever we come onto our page. So let's go to our HTML file, go to our body, and on body we want to type in onload, so when the page loads we want to call our function. Alright, so now whenever we go onto our website and refresh, our tasks are automatically displayed. That's great. Okay, so now let's move on to our next function, which is task done. Before then, let's go back to our task container and find our button and then put an onClick event to call this function. So that way we don't forget later on. Okay, and in this function, we're going to take in two parameters, which is our task and our task tools. So let's go back up to our function in our button and add these parameters. So here we're going to pass in this .parent element. This is the parent element of this button, which is our task tools, and the parent element of our task tools, which is just our task. And then beside this, we just want to pass in this .parent element. That's it. And that's basically how you pass functions and use them. Okay, so the goal of this function is whenever we click done on our task, we want to take the task out of our unfinished container and put it into our finished container. That's the #1 goal. The second goal, do the same but with Firebase. So we'll take it out of our unfinished task in Firebase and put it into our finished task in Firebase. So just follow along, it's pretty easy to do. Okay, so now let's implement this with Firebase. Alright, so now we're done with task done. See what I did there? We're done with task done because we're done with the function. Alright, let's keep it moving. Okay, so now we're done with editing. Let's move on to task delete. So now we're going to create a function which is going to be called create finished task. And just like we did in create unfinished task, we're going to copy and paste everything and paste it in here. The only difference is we're going to get rid of anything that has to do with task tools. Awesome. And just like we did with unfinished task, you want to go to the HTML file and in your body tag and then paste create finished task. So that way it creates your finished and unfinished task when you first open the website or log in or whatever you guys choose to do with this. Alright, so now if we save our file, go back to our website, refresh, congratulations, you officially finished. You officially created your finished to-do list. Or you can just say you actually finished your finished task. Aha ha, aha, aha. Alright, but that's going to be it for the video, guys. I kind of stopped talking in the middle just so you guys can watch and kind of figure things out for yourselves. But if you guys do have any questions, drop them in the comments. I got y'all. And until next time, RhymBil out. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm not out yet. But the one thing I do want to mention is, remember in my last video when I said you guys can pay a high price of $2 to get the script? Well, because you guys actually went through this 30-minute or so video, I'm actually going to give it away for free. Just because, you guys are pretty cool for watching my video. And until next time, RhymBil out.